This is a sermon based upon the book of Hosea. How many of you have seen The Wizard of Oz? It is a story of discovery, of an orphan girl getting swept away from her home in Kansas by a tornado to an imaginary land of Oz, with no way to get home to her auntie. Along the way, she discovers that the only hope for her rescue and return lies with a distant and powerful wizard, a fearsome man with immense power. So she sets out on her journey along the yellow brick road to find the wizard, along the way meeting friends and enemies, encountering trials, and learning to stand on her own as she seeks to find her way back home. Eventually, she and her two friends, the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion, come to the Emerald City, the city of Oz, where the wizard lives. And Dorothy eventually forces her way into an audience with the mighty wizard, who lives up to his fearsome billing with his huge angry head and his bellowing and fierce voice, complete with smoke and flames shooting about. But then something unexpected happens. Dorothy's little dog Toto pulls the curtain back and exposes who the wizard really is. A kind and gentle man who ultimately teaches Dorothy that she already had everything she needed to return home. She just didn't know how, so he showed her. I wonder if God is a little like the wizard. When we read early parts of the Old Testament, God seems like an angry God, a judgmental God who often seems more disgusted with humans than anything else, often tempted to put us all out of our misery. But then something happens. Some people who see things differently enter the picture, and they start telling the people who have this harsh image of God, and, not coincidentally, are often behaving quite badly toward others, that maybe God isn't who they thought he was. They are like Toto, pulling back the curtain a little, and they start showing us what God is really like. These people are the prophets of the Old Testament, and they start to bend our understanding of God and prepare us to recognize God's true nature, God's light, that we will find in Jesus Christ. The Torah describes God as a tribal God, a God who was always on the Israelite side, a God who smote their enemies, killing their men, women, and children. God was jealous and vengeful, and often distant, a God of judgment. And it was easy for the Israelites to understand God in this way during the reigns of David and Solomon, when things seemed like they were on top of the world. They were God's only people, and their many enemies were God's enemies. And everything they did in their lives seemed to work, was successful, even the cruel and dastardly things. Everything they did was validated by the God of their understanding, this God of victory, their victory. It was easy for them to tell the story of how God approves of these things when everything works. But what happens when things fall apart? When their nation is defeated by the Babylonians, and Jerusalem is sacked, the temple destroyed, and the people are taken captive and made slaves? They want desperately to believe that God is on their side, but all the evidence now suggests otherwise. Maybe they did something to earn disfavor with God. What do you do when God is no longer on your side? Or maybe, just maybe, God is simply different than they expected. How do you transition from one understanding of God to another because the original understanding no longer seems to hold water? Enter the prophets. Have you ever had a friend who was just a little too honest with you? The kind of person who offered uninvited critiques that called you up short and then lacked the social graces to do it in private? I have a guy who works for me who sometimes has a bit of a short attention span. One day he and I were having an intense conversation, and I was discussing some changes I needed to see with him, when all of a sudden he pauses the conversation and says, "Garrett, I just can't listen right now. You have a wild hair that is extending from one nostril and curling up into the other. I can't even tell which nostril grew the hair. You're going to have to fix that before I can pay attention." With that, I completely lost track of what I was saying. I pulled out my phone and put it into selfie mode so I could see what was happening, and sure enough, there it was, this offending hair. As soon as I saw it, I started to laugh. This conversation would have to wait for another day. My friend is, in at least one way, like the prophets of the Bible, and so is Toto in the Wizard of Oz story. I think it is relatively easy to believe that in their time the prophets were a pretty unpopular group of people. They were the ones who pulled the curtain back, who told the nation of Israel that it had food in its teeth, or pointed out grand hypocrisies of the powerful. They saw things differently, and they helped the people wake up to a new way of seeing things, a new reality. Hosea was such a prophet, and the book of Hosea in the Bible can be difficult to read and understand, as can many of the prophetic books of the Bible. We often lack the historical context by which to understand what is going on. An author and mentor of mine, a man whom I have never met, retold the story of Hosea in a manner I could understand. He took some literary license, but tried to stay faithful to the intent of Hosea's author. The mentor's name is John Spong, and he was an Episcopal bishop. I'll try to recreate it for you, but my version won't live up to his. Once upon a time, there was an older, staid, and highly respected holy man named Hosea. He fell for and married the party-loving youngest daughter of an old merchant. The daughter's name was Gomer, and she was known for her dark, flashing eyes and dancing feet. The marriage created quite a stir and a lot of tongue-wagging. While Hosea was settled, Gomer was into the social scene and she loved to flirt a lot. People wondered if the union would last. But Hosea was proud of his bride and he vowed to make her happy. In the beginning, things seemed to go well. She made Hosea feel young again, and as she took him out on the town and they attended events, and he basked in her popularity. But the pace of this new life began to wear him out. He longed for his quieter life, and this created tension. He started getting tired and wanted to leave parties earlier, so they reached a compromise. He would leave earlier and she could stay and be escorted home by friends. Though dangerous in a patriarchal society, this compromise seemed to work. Later, however, he found he didn't want to go to the parties at all, so a more dangerous compromise was reached. She would go with friends to the parties, while he stayed home and played Scrabble. Eventually, however, she even wore out those friends, so she would go to the parties by herself. Over the years, these solo trips became the norm. But unescorted women in that society was not the norm, and this left her vulnerable and unprotected, especially for a sensuous, fun-loving woman like Gomer. And while Hosea was concerned, he just couldn't keep up with her. Eventually, his fears were realized. One night, she didn't come home at all. Hosea searched high and low, but found no trace of her. But Gomer wasn't lost. She was free and on her own now, and became a favorite plaything among the jet-set crowd. Things continued this way for years, though Hosea never gave up searching for her. Life in the fast lane catches up with all of us, even for a woman like Gomer, though. And soon enough, she was replaced by younger and fresher playthings. Even Gomer recognized the signs, the crow's feet, the sagging in places she didn't want to sag, and in ways she never wanted to before. Whereas she used to be the plaything for the rich and famous, now she was a plaything for anyone, turning to prostitution to survive. Even that faded to the point when she had nothing left that anybody else wanted, and she reached the lowest rung, becoming a slave. But Hosea never stopped searching for his wife, though his search was less frantic. Hosea, knowing the ways of the world, anticipated how things were likely to go and started looking for her at the slave markets. But even then, he was lonely, and he did not know if his wife was alive or dead. One day, years later, he wanders into a certain slave market, and just as he enters, a particular slave is placed on the block. Hair is matted and graying, eyes are bloodshot, and there's deep creases in her face that told a tale of a hard life. The crowd was insulting and derisive, laughing at the idea that anyone would even bid on her. Hosea studies her, and the moment he realizes who she is, without hesitation, he bids 15 pieces of silver, which was the price for a young, strong male slave. The crowd turned to see who was so stupid as to bid that, assuming that he was naive or had been duped. But Hosea ignored them, and he paid the price. He walked forward and took her by the hand and led her past. And then once home, he informed his servants that she was not a slave, but his wife, and he installed her back into her place of honor as the mistress of his household, the center of his affection. I do not believe this story should be confused as history. It was an allegory. In many cases within the Bible, the relationship between God and the people of Israel is likened to a marriage. And in this case, the people of Israel are like Gomer and God like Hosea. Of us, our wandering souls, hard-headed and our pleasure-seeking. Of God, patient, forgiving, and loving. But note how it is distinctly different from the God we came to know in the Torah, in the first 5 books. We don't see the judgmental God, the God who wants to annihilate us. We see a loving and forgiving God. We see the God of love. It is easy to forget that Jesus was part of this prophetic tradition. Christianity seems to want to condition us to the thought that there is a seamless continuity extending across all the books of the Bible. This book written by God, maybe by candlelight from his great study in heaven. But in fact, it is a book written by men across time. There is great disparity in the ways in which God is portrayed throughout the Bible. It is a herky-jerky attempt on the part of ancient people to understand how God relates to their lives and to the lives of their societies. And just like the prophets before Jesus, his life stands against the misunderstandings common at the time of his life, the same misunderstandings that flummox us today as a society. As I'm working through these notes, it is Holy Week, and I'm thinking about Palm Sunday that just passed, how people still maintain this Davidic Savior longing to return to their nation, to its glorious past. In some ways, it seems that Palm Sunday is the death throes of this understanding of God, the all-powerful warrior meting out justice to balance all of the injustices in our lives. The problem is that those death throes continue to this day, and so many people, and seemingly the world, reject Jesus' notion of God. Sure, we give lip service, but just like the people lining the streets on Palm Sunday, we really don't seek the transformation through love. We simply want safety and freedom to live in whatever dysfunctional ways make sense to us in the moment that justifies our behavior. We celebrate qualities abhorrent to the gospel of love and elect flawed leaders we believe to be representative of our Christian values. And in this way they are. Unfortunately, they aren't representative of the values taught and lived by Jesus. But Jesus' life serves as a prophetic realignment of who God is in the minds of humanity. Our God is love, a God of all people. God is not claimed by a single people to the detriment of others. God's strength is demonstrated in vulnerability, not in conquering others. God's wholeness is found in humility, not egotism. God's love is demonstrated in unearned forgiveness, grace, not punishment and retribution. This past weekend, my family, along with those of my sisters, placed the ashes from my parents' bodies on a beach out on the Tamales Point Peninsula. It was a place where they honeymooned nearly 70 years ago, a place where they took us many times as we were growing up. The week leading up to it was, for me, reflective. I thought about it a lot, and I tried to understand what I was feeling. We go through our lives, and while we're in them, they seem at times wonderful and difficult and beautiful and challenging and confusing. But when it is all done, we're reduced down to a pile of ash. Their ashes together would easily have fit into a child's sandcastle bucket. We bury their ashes in the sand, where they will be, or they were, quickly released out to the sea, dispersed into eternity, something I can never hold again, seemingly forgotten, literally in the sands of the beach and in the sands of time. But this is the lesson Jesus teaches us, of loving and forgiving God who redeems our lives by showing us how to live in the fullness of love, so that the record of our lives echo in eternity through the love of God in our hearts and the hearts of those touched by us, that our lives were lived not in futility, but as testaments to God's love and grace, so that one day, when we no longer need our bodies, we continue to live in the fullness of God's love. Live not in fear, live in love. Let God's light shine through you today and every day. It is okay. Amen.